Hi everybody, welcome to Studio 14. I'm Kim Newcomer with the City of Fort Collins. Thanks for joining us today. Well, Fort Collins is known for a lot of different things. I mean, best place to live, best place to go to school, best place to retire, and more, Fort Collins is becoming known as a hub of sustainability and really a thought leader in energy efficiency. I'm really excited to introduce my guest today. It is our Chief Sustainability Officer, Bruce Hendee. Bruce, thanks for being here.
Thank you.
First time on the show. I'm so glad you can join us. It's great.
Pleased to be here.
Wonderful. Well, again, I think over the last few years in particular, Fort Collins is really establishing a reputation as a leader in not only green technology, but specifically energy efficiency. Tell us a little bit about what you see out in the community and how that's really happened over the last few years.
I think it's interesting, Kim, how we've seen a national trend towards energy conservation as well as alternative energy. I think we've seen the solar market gain ground, and we've seen conservation gain ground, and I think a large part of that's surrounding climate change and climate adaptation and being able to kind of allow America and other countries to adapt to the changing climate and be able to try and combat climate change at the same time. So it's a trend that I think Fort Collins actually started long before it became popular.
Yeah.
Back 1990s, somewhere in that range, and I think some of our earlier council members really were proponents of this, and so it's deeply embedded in our culture as a community, and I think I've really seen over the years that that's just grown in terms of its intensity and our fervor and our desire to see it happen.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think it's this sort of community-wide ethic, right? I mean, there's very few things that sort of unite people in thoughts and ideas, and this idea of responsibility, whether you believe, regardless of what you believe about climate change, and I know we can get into some of the data about that here in a little bit, but there is this idea of being responsible, and that includes everything from being a responsible user of fuel, energy, recycling, minimizing waste, and this community really has been at the forefront of a lot of those initiatives, and as a result, our city government has a lot of programs and policies in place to help foster that.
That's true. They do. When you travel around the country, you don't see the level of interest in sustainability that you see in Fort Collins. And I think when you go to there's other communities, of course, that are doing a great job as well, but Fort Collins is it's just part of who we are. And I think when you look at our culture and the people and our level of participation in sustainable activities, it just becomes so apparent that it is just embedded in our whole entire community.
So let's talk about a couple of the initiatives that the city is involved with. First, let's talk a little bit about the Clean Energy Cluster. I think this is a little known initiative that started a few years ago that it kind of operates below the radar on the local scene. Tell us a little bit about what that is and some of the things that they're doing.
The Clean Energy Cluster is really, to a large degree, it's focused on the integration of the community, the university, and who else? Sorry, I forgot.
Private business, I guess.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Private business, thanks. And so when we look at that, it's really a group that comes together on a regular basis monthly basis to look at how we can kind of improve our capabilities as a community in all of these different areas. The Clean Energy Cluster to a large degree is based on business promotion around clean energy, and a lot of this kind of interestingly had its origins in university connections.
Right.
And,
so explain what that is for folks that don't know.
Yeah, University Connections is really a great program that was started as a community-based program. The Community Foundation, together with the city, originally kind of initiated this and brought it forward, where we went out to the community and had several hundred people get involved in the ideation, I guess you'd say, of great things that we could do for our community. And sustainability, of course, was right in there with those.
Right.
And Fort Zed is an idea that emerged from University Connections. Fort Zed's really an idea that's really emerged around creating zero energy between CSU and the downtown and putting a boundary on that and kind of generating as much energy as we can from renewable resources within a short distance of the downtown area so that we became, in essence, self-contained in clean energy.
And Fort Zed's a really interesting program because this is another example of collaboration, right? It's the university getting involved, it's the city involved, and it's all these different businesses and organizations that are looking at how do we produce the same amount, if not more, energy locally that we use, right? So how do you become a net zero? What Fort Zed is Zero Energy District,
Yeah.
the ZED.
Yeah, it is.
And you know, I think recently they had some sort of some tests that were happening throughout the community on, you know, how could we generate energy here and how could we save energy there? Can you tell us about any of those different individual projects?
Yeah, probably the easiest way to envision that is what we call smart grid.
Okay.
And smart grid is a project that actually manages energy on a pretty much instantaneous basis so that we're able to constantly adapt as sources become more distributed. The historic model for energy is that we have big power plants. Like in our case, we have rawhide, right? So we have rawhide power plant, but as you get into renewable resources, imagine what that means. We've got wind turbines all over the country, and in some cases we have photovoltaic panels, solar energy. Well, that energy is all developed and comes back into a system, into our electric grid. Well, being able to manage that energy as it moves throughout all of these different resources called distributed energy really becomes complicated. So Fort Zed took that model of distributed energy and put that into a computerized system that enabled us to move energy back and forth almost instantaneously.
Wow.
So smart grid is what that refers to, and that's kind of what we started with Fort Zed.
I mean, it's amazing. I think when we look at the technology and then the innovation and the intelligence that goes behind that simple concept, right? It sounds so easy.
It does.
You just make some energy here, you move it over there when it's needed, but the actual management of that, and again, the technology and the brain power, for lack of a better word, the professionalism that comes behind that is really amazing. And the fact that we actually have that resource here in Fort Collins, I think, is pretty notable.
It is notable. Actually, a fellow by the name of Sunil Sherian with Spire kind of first started promoting this as we began developing the Fort Zed concept through university connections. And at the same time he was starting his company, he also got a contract with Denmark to go over and help test that in Denmark.
Right.
For, in case you don't know, Denmark is one of the leading wind turbine cities or areas in the countries in the planet, and they're doing a lot of work in this area. Well, he went over there and kind of got that started, but really Fort Collins became our launching point for the smart grid technology, and I think it was really great timing, one of those coincidences that just was amazing. And so we were able to bring that online, do that, and now as a result of what we did on Fort Zed, it's really become an internationally recognized model.
Right. You know, and that's a great segue into another initiative that your team is working on, which is this Net Zero Cities Symposium. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Net Zero Cities is really about a long-term future energy strategy. And as we've been looking forward into the future and saying, where are we going as a planet to adapt to climate change and really begin to reduce our carbon footprint, we've looked out into the future. And really what that entails is getting to ultimately net zero carbon. So that means that our energy is a carbon neutral source, our transportation is a carbon neutral source. And as we move forward, we need a strategy, a long-term game plan, if you will, on how we're going to get out there. And our city currently has a climate action plan that says we're going to have a 80% reduction in carbon emissions by 2050.
Right.
And so that takes a lot of strategy to get there. As we began thinking about an idea for how to move Fort Zed forward, how to move this game plan forward to reduce our carbon, we realized that there were a lot of other communities throughout the planet that had been tackling this many years before. In particular, if you all remember the 1974 oil embargo. You may not remember that.
Oh, go on, say that again.
Yeah. So the 1974 oil embargo that OPEC did really caused a lot of countries to realize that they were way too dominant on fossil fuels. Countries like Denmark and Brazil began exploring options to get out of that. They made dedicated goals, actually. So when we started the Net Zero Cities idea, it was really to learn from them. Over 40 years that you've been doing this, what are the systems-based approaches that you're using to move towards a net zero future? And they've made good headway. So the concept behind the symposium is really based on that. What is the systems-based approach to looking long-term and figuring out how do we get to net zero? Net zero on energy, net zero on vehicles too, which are a major carbon source. And to that end, we went out and we actually asked those people in those countries that are making great inroads in the area to come and speak here. So we have gotten the climate director for Copenhagen will be here to speak. Oh, wow. We'll also have the Minister of Energy from Sao Paulo, Brazil will be here. And interestingly, I think, of course, everybody's familiar with Fukushima and what happened in Japan. They've completely changed the direction of what they're doing in energy. They were almost entirely dependent on nuclear energy, and since Fukushima, they have completely changed direction. They've developed a whole new energy strategy, and they're going to be here to speak and tell us what that strategy is. Wow. We've also got other people coming from other parts of the country. But the conference, as we've developed it, I think a couple parts of it, it's really a three-legged stool. And one part is based on education, in particular educating the millennial generation, those that are coming up today, on learning and being prepared to move into a clean and renewable energy society. The other part is on carbon transportation, which is the electric vehicles, and then energy is the last one. So those three kind of intertwine in this symposium to help us educate. And we have some pretty interesting speakers on all those topics.
Now, I'm not going to, you know, spoil the speakers, and I don't want to steal their thunder, but, you know, how do you see, Bruce, like, how do you see the role of cities, right? You know, I hear some people say, as a city, you're just sort of one small piece of the overall puzzle, and so actions from the city level maybe aren't as impactful as actions from a country, per se. But at the same time, you know, on the other side of the coin, you have people say, well, if you don't start at the city level, then it will never grow to be a national movement. So how do you see and how do you interpret sort of the future of the way cities are going to lead this initiative?
You know, as I look across the country, I see an increasing trend to localism. That when our government isn't necessarily at the federal level, it's pretty much deadlocked at this point. We're not making a lot of progress. It's the local community that has a direct connection between the voters and their elected officials, where we really can make quick and kind of rapid changes and make real progress in a notable time. Part of what we're trying to accomplish, I think, too, is to develop, since Fort Collins has a long history of renewable energy and sustainability, we really would like to have a leadership role, but more for the reason that we want to develop replicable models, so that as we kind of move forward at the local level and we figure out how to do these systems, how to put them in place, and then get them actually working, we document that and we do it in a way that can be expanded out and we can share it with others. This really is a planetary issue that we're addressing, and so we want to be part of the solution. That's where localism comes in, I think.
I think that's great. For people who are interested in learning more about the speakers of the symposium and, you know, looking at attending, website for information or a place they can go to get more?
You know, we will have it actually on our FC.gov website. So it'll be up there. Anybody that can go to FC.gov, which is our base level website, will be able to get access and sign up and register for it.
And it's open to everybody?
It's open to everybody. Actually, you know, the night that we're doing this, it's October 16th and 17th.
Okay.
And for those people that are interested, on the night of the 16th, we're going to have Professor Toji from Japan, who will do a free lecture to the public, to anybody that wants to come, and he'll just be sharing the message that night of Fukushima and Japan's change in energy philosophy. So that'll be kind of two components. During the day we'll have the conference, and at night we'll have him actually do an open presentation. And that'll be at the Hilton, so it'll be over on Prospect, and people can come to that free of charge.
Do you think that this type of symposium is something that we would look at doing annually, or how do we sort of continue the momentum, right? We learn all these great things. How do we then take that next step?
Well, interestingly, one of the things we're doing to make that become a living kind of an idea is we're bringing in Dr. Martine Kirkosson from Colorado State University, and we're integrating this whole learning idea directly into the conference so that people that are participating will be able to actually participate in a dialogue conversation about the future energy strategies.
So great.
So it should be real interesting. I think that part of it's going to be really fascinating. I might say also we have a Dr. Prasad Ram, who is the founder of a new education website called Guru. It's Gooru, if anybody wants to check that out. And, but they're a spinoff of Google. And the CEO of that company, Prasad Ram, is actually left Google to help start this as part of Google's effort. They have 200,000 topics online. Really amazing, fascinating kind of a site. But it really is focused on the education of the next generation and the types of tools that they use and the learning models they use.
So talk about that a little bit. I mean, you mentioned this sort of focus on a younger generation, millennium generation earlier. You know, why the focus? Why the importance? Or what opportunity are we trying to take advantage of?
You know, there's a trend in the United States. It's called STEM, which is education in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. There's multiple reasons to do this. Number one, it's important to bring our next generation up to be prepared to enter the workforce. It also has to do with our competitive ability across the globe. If we don't bring up people in that area, our companies will fall farther behind in our competitive edge. So it's kind of altruistic, and at the same time, it's really focused on a very real problem that we all have and we need to address.
Have you seen sort of that evolution? We talk a little bit about how the way we learn changes over time, right? And even just looking at how do we engage a younger generation in this issue that is surely gaining momentum, but maybe it wasn't theirs to begin with.
Yeah, I definitely see a change in the way we're learning. I have to confess to you, I know that's terrible.
Maybe we should have a couch here you can lay down.
Yeah, probably.
Talk it out a little bit.
Catharsis. You know, I took a class at Front Range Community College and jumped in with all the young people, and I was watching how they, you know, my generation tends to be single task focused. The new generation shares information with one another and multitasks in a computer environment in a completely different way. And I think it becomes collective knowledge rather than individual knowledge in many cases, so we're seeing that happen a lot.
It's a lot of fun. I think this is a really exciting event for Fort Collins, and again, one that really it's happening here in Fort Collins, but probably representative of the entire northern Colorado region and maybe even Front Range. I mean, I think Colorado in general is has some great momentum behind energy efficiency and conservation and forward-thinking ideas and companies.
They do. You know, Levelland's going to be a partner in this symposium, in which we're just thrilled to have them be a partner. And I think they've really expressed a high degree of excitement about it. And, you know, they really are becoming very aware and very conscious and very forward-thinking now towards the future in terms of energy and conservation. And so we're real excited to have them as partners. You know, regionally, too, I have to bring up one other one that just I think you might be interested in, and that is a real interesting new effort called the Electrification Coalition.
That's right, you did mention that, and I've been afraid to try and say electrification
yeah, it's pretty hard
on TV.
Say that 10 times. Try not to get 10
So tell me about it.
It's an organization that's really focused on the deployment of electric vehicles in the United States in a way that makes it normalized, so that the average person doesn't think twice about going out and purchasing an electric vehicle. And as we look towards an energy future that's carbon-free, as I think we probably all know, our major carbon use right now is in the vehicle.
Sure.
And it's not like we're going to move away from single occupancy vehicles overnight. I mean, we're doing a lot of great things there, but the Electrification Coalition, which has some very prominent companies and their board of directors, including Nissan and Federal Express and others. They really want to help demonstrate deployment of electric vehicles, and they've actually picked 2 cities in the United States to be deployment sites. One is Fort Collins and the other is Orlando.
Wow.
Yeah, so pretty cool.
That's really cool.
You know, the reason they picked Fort Collins was because we represent a mid-size American city that's about 150,000 people, and but a forward-thinking one. So it plays into what I said earlier about our long-term history with sustainability. So now the plan is for us to work with them to help deploy electric vehicles in a kind of normalized manner here. The other city they picked, by the way, was Orlando, because they could get a lot of rental vehicles there.
So those people have no choice. They'll drive whatever you give them.
Yeah, exactly. So you go into the car rental shop and you say you got an electric car.
So, I mean, talk about the idea of electric vehicles. To me, the big barrier is, well, there's 2 barriers. One is price. My perception, whether that's true or not, is that they're more expensive. And then the second piece of that is the idea of charging, right? I mean, that sounds a little intimidating to me. So does this initiative work, is it the education piece, or is it, it's probably multiple fronts, I'm sure, but I imagine part of it has to be education, and part of it has to be making cars more affordable.
It's multiple fronts.
Yeah.
You know, and I think affordability is a part of it, because everything becomes a niche until you can deploy it at scale. And once you can deploy it at scale, then it becomes commoditized and you're able to bring down the pricing. So part of their challenge is, how do we get this thing going?
Right.
And to that end, charging it, for somebody like yourself, you'd go home at night and plug it in when you get in the garage.
Right.
It's easy. It's in it.
You imply that I can actually fit a car in my garage with all the junk in there, but that was very dear. Thank you.
So it's a non-intimidating way of doing it, though. And then, you know, ultimately deployment of charging stations throughout the city. And that's a policy, and it's got a lot of issues associated with it, but we're starting to tackle that now. And so I think as you bring that on, marketing the idea in a way that's acceptable to the general public, you would be a perfect test case.
I would be.
If we could get you to go buy one, and it's a reasonable price, and it can be recharged easily, and it's reliable, so you don't have to worry if you go to Denver that you're going to
not have a place to plug it in. And
I mean, all those are issues that are associated with it, but there's really good progress happening in the industry. Our utility department just bought a Chevy Volt, and got a chance to take that down to Denver a couple weeks ago, and it was just quiet, smooth, no problems.
Oh, that's very cool.
And so I think as we begin to unfold this, it's going to be a bigger and bigger part of the solution.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to hear more about the progress on all of these. Again, I think best place for information is fcgov.com. And we'll be promoting the symposium here, I think, in the next few days, or if not weeks, and hopefully people will sign up and learn some great things and help us implement.
Well, great. We hope so, too.
All right. Well, Bruce, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been great.
My pleasure.
Thank you all for watching as well. This has been Studio 14. I am Kim Newcomer from the City of Fort Collins, and we'll catch you next time.